Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for joining us here in Manchester as a former presidential candidate who has now come out for the current Republican frontrunner, former President Donald Trump. There's been a lot of talk about the 50% number, that he could put it up here in New Hampshire. He was able to get it in Iowa. But that means roughly half of Republican voters say no. Some of them voted for you in Iowa. What does that say?
Look, I think that the Iowa voter base was crystal clear, and it's why I made the decision that I did. I wasn't expecting to drop out that night, but I think the most important decisions I actually make with gut instinct rather than micro-analyzing the data. The voice of the people was clear in that case. And that they want an America First candidate. I think there were two America First candidates in this race. That's Donald Trump and myself. I got about 8% of the vote there. I was about to get 8% in New Hampshire. And I felt it was important to send that vote Donald Trump's direction to deliver a decisive margin of victory here, because I think it is time for this GOP primary to end. I do think when we think about who's the right leader to, as I believe needs to be done, shut down the administrative state, revive our economy, actually seal our border, actually revive even our national identity in this country, I think that is Donald Trump. The people spoke loud and clear. It's time for this primary to end, and I think for all intents and purposes, that's going to happen by the end of this night, whether or not the other candidate acknowledges it.
You said in the first debate that Donald Trump was the best president of your lifetime.
I specifically said of the 21st century, although I think that there's a good case to be made. It's for my lifetime. Absolutely.
So, of course, you would endorse him. Why would you run against him?
Well, look, the case I made in the entire campaign is that we do need to reach the next generation. And I was able to reach the next generation in a way that nobody in our party's history really has. We had 40% of our donors to my campaign were first-time ever donors to the GOP, galvanizing young people that I think the GOP has wrongly, if I may say so, written off. It's not that young people on college campuses or elsewhere are necessarily against what the GOP stands for. It's that they are hungry for a party that stands for something. What does it mean to be a Republican? It's not just being against the Biden Democrat agenda. It's about standing for the ideals of the American Revolution. Meritocracy, free speech, open debate, self-governance. The idea that we, the people, create a government that's accountable to us, not the other way around. These are basic foundational ideals that I think even many libertarians, important in a state like New Hampshire, many independents, including young people, I think did gravitate to over the course of my campaign, and I think will gravitate to in the course of Donald Trump's campaign for the general election.
They're still going to have an 80-year-old to vote for, though.
Well, I don't think it's just about what the actual age of the person is. Even in this primary, Nikki Haley is younger in age than Donald Trump, but represents an older, outdated vision of the Republican Party, fighting foreign wars that don't advance the American interest, a surveillance state here at home that would make Dick Cheney proud. That's an old, outdated vision of the Republican Party. So it's less about specifically the age of the candidate, but more the age of the ideas and the vision. And one thing that I have been encouraged about, I've spent some time with Donald Trump this week, including in multiple stops on the campaign trail and the events that have been held at night. I've been really encouraged, like in a deep and personal way, by hearing him talk more about the importance of free speech in America, how that's actually vital. It is. It's in the First Amendment for a reason. But at a moment where the Democrats and Joe Biden have abandoned the free speech agenda in the United States, this is a wide open opportunity for the Republican Party to seize this as our identity. I did that over the course of my race, and I'm really heartened by seeing Donald Trump. Increasingly, you're seeing him mention that more in the campaign trail, coming out against central bank digital currency, something that I think that many libertarians here in New Hampshire also care about. I think this expands the scope of our movement. I think it's going to be major in delivering success this November.
I do want to get back to the CBDC point, but just on the idea, you've had a lot of conversations with Donald Trump over the course of this week. I'm wondering how many of them included what role you could have in a future administration. What job would you want?
To tell you the truth, none of our conversations included that, because what I've said...
Okay, so what job would you want, even if you haven't talked about it yet?
Well, I'll tell you this isn't about me. I mean, really, my whole purpose was actually asking myself a year and a half ago, how was I going to make maximal difference for this country? Having lived the American dream. I'm not a politician. I'm an entrepreneur. I've founded multi-billion-dollar companies. My wife is a surgeon who has similarly lived the American dream. The question for us was, how would we make a maximal impact on this country? And the decision we made was for me to be the next president. Now, that choice belongs to the people and not to us. And so the people have made clear that that's going to be Donald Trump. But one of the things I wanted to accomplish most in my presidency, if I were elected, was to shut down that fourth branch of government, shut down those agencies, really lay off 75% of the federal bureaucrat headcount, and actually restore 3 branches of government rather than 4. I think Donald Trump is the best candidate who's actually going to be able to achieve that amongst the field here, and I will help him achieve that in whatever way is best for the country.
So
That's
let's
what I
talk
will
about
say.
some of those regulatory agencies, because one of them, the Securities and Exchange Commission, at least until Congress says otherwise, oversees, say, crypto. And you had a whole crypto platform
Yes.
when you were running. Would you like to be SEC chair, or you don't think there should be an SEC chair?
So, look, I don't think that that's particularly a right specific role for me or whatever, but I do have strong views on what I think the future of clarity in regulation needs to be. So there's certain agencies that can be shut down even without congressional action. You could take the Department of Education is in that category. The ATF is in that category. Actually, the FBI is in that category. Those are agencies that can be shut down by presidential action, all the way going back to the Presidential Reorganization Act in 1977. For legal reasons, the SEC doesn't fit that description, but I do think a lot of these agencies, SEC, FDA, et cetera, need drastic reductions in headcount and drastic reform in their scope of focus. And a lot of these agencies, the SEC included, I think have been guilty of a regulation by enforcement agenda, where the way you know what the regulations are is based on who they enforce them against. And I think that's wrong, regardless of you're talking about a Democrat administration or Republican administration. We're a nation of laws, not of men. And one of the most important Supreme Court cases of our lifetime came out last year. It's West Virginia versus EPA, which said that the EPA's regulations of the coal industry were unconstitutional because Congress never gave them that authority. Well, if those regulations are unconstitutional, I think most federal regulations, including those from SEC to EPA to FDA to many other three-letter agencies, are also unconstitutional today. So given that foundation laid by the Supreme Court last year, given the possibility for the election of an America First president, which I think is going to happen, I think Donald Trump is going to be the next president, there's a real opportunity to rein in the administrative state and to restore what our founding fathers envisioned, which is three co-equal branches of government that are accountable to the people rather than an unconstitutional fourth branch of government of unelected bureaucrats that are the ones actually setting policy today. So if I were to be elected the president, I'm not this time, but if I were to have been elected the president, that would have been my top focus. That's how you unlock the economy. That's how you fix the justice system. That's how you revive our constitutional republic. And so whatever role I have inside or outside of government, and there's a lot of ways to change this country even outside of government, it's going to be to continue to move the ball forward to revive that constitutional vision that our country was founded on.
Donald Trump mentioned you last night. What did you tell him when it comes to central bank digital currency? You mentioned that.
Yeah, so we spoke about this, I want to say a little under a week ago. The first time we spoke about it was backstage before he and I spoke side by side at an earlier rally.
He said, this is for Vivek.
Yeah.
What's he going to do for you?
Well, I think that is do the right thing for the country. And so what I talked to him about was a few ideas that I felt like would appeal to libertarians who I believe should be supporting Donald Trump, but also are consistent with Donald Trump's America First vision. And I want to give him credit because I think a lot of the media misportrays this man. They portray him in one way. What I see, and I've gotten to know him over the last several years, but especially even in recent weeks and days, is somebody who wants to carefully actually evaluate what's the right policy for the country. A central bank digital currency, I believe, is a threat to liberty in this country because it creates a mechanism for the government to be able to wipe out your bank account or wipe out your dollars if you say or do something that the government disapproves of, as you see in places like China, as you see even happen to the Canadian truckers, the Freedom Envoy, losing access to their financial bank accounts. I think a central bank digital currency takes us further in that direction. Well, I explained that to Donald Trump, and I give him a lot of credit for being intellectually open, getting to the bottom of it. He took advice from a couple of other people who he trusted around him. A few nights later, I saw him mention that. And again, last night when he and I were at that rally together, came out strongly in favor of what I believe is the right answer, which is to oppose the creation of a central bank digital currency. And I was proud last night to also see him talking about free speech and the value of free speech and open expression in the United States, something that the Democrats have abandoned, which I think will be one of the keys to a landslide election victory this fall. It's also why I think many libertarians, not even traditional Republicans, but libertarians in New Hampshire are going to come out and vote for Donald Trump today. I believe they already are over the course of today. And that's part of what's going to make this a decisive win today, and I believe a decisive win in November.
All right, and we'll leave it on that note. Vivek Ramaswamy, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, guys.